On today's show, I have Danny Nokes from 1067 The Fan jumping on to preview the 2023 Washington Nationals right after this.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Ryan Clary, and I have taken my Nationals passion into podcast form here with the Locked On Podcast Network. And when I do these shows, I get to have some friends of mine join me, and that is what we are doing today with Mr. Danny Nokes from 1067 The Fan. Danny, how we doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. It's great to hear from you. Thanks for having me back on Locked On Nationals. You know, ever since the calendar turned to February, I'm starting to have those nice, warm spring thoughts, right? We're only single-digit days away from pitchers and catchers reporting. Some Nats, like K-Bear Ruiz, already down there at West Palm Beach getting ready for the season. So we're all getting into that spring mode, and we'll officially be there once we get through Super Bowl Sunday.
And that's exactly how I think of it. You know, when the calendar hits January, my mind immediately goes to baseball. Like, I don't know why. I think that's because usually, like, back when I played and when I'm sure you played, that's when you kind of started to pick it up, start training for high school baseball. So I think it's always just kind of been in my mind that baseball season is on its way once it hits January 1st.
Yeah. And you know, in the fall too, the higher you get up, right? Just not just high school, but obviously when you get into college and into the professional ranks, the fall is actually a pretty crucial point in the season because it's the off season at that point for most teams, obviously, unless you're going deep into the Major League Baseball playoffs and going on to eventually win a World Series. But I know that there's a lot of training at all different levels that goes on throughout that, as well as throughout the winter. So I'm glad that we're out of the doldrums of January, though, because we actually have real baseball slated for later on this month, and that's great, at least if your definition of real baseball is spring training baseball.
I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're with me on this one. We're both baseball nerds. We just want to watch the games.
Yep.
But, you know, the Nationals, a lot of people are not too excited about the Washington Nationals this year. And, you know, there is some sense of optimism, but I was discussing this the other day. There will be things to talk about when it comes to this Nationals team. You're going to look at guys like C.J. Abrams. You're going to look at guys like Mackenzie Gore, K-Bear Ruiz. This year is about development. So besides the development part of things, what are you going to be looking for and really just trying to hone in on as far as this Nationals team?
Well, when you look at them from top to bottom, and we talked about this the last time I had the chance to jump on Locked On Nationals, Ryan, but obviously they don't have the strongest roster in the NL East, certainly not the National League. And you can understand why they're being projected to win so few games. So when you're looking at what to get excited about going into the season, I think, like you said, the development, but something that I'm certainly going to have a very close eye on this year is just the health of this team. You know, how healthy are they going to be able to stay? Because they're going to be very thin. They're not going to have a ton of depth at really any position. So I think the health is most important actually for the pitching rotation, for the starting five. And I think as Nationals fans, we're well aware of that because we've seen what injuries can do to someone like Max Scherzer, like Steven Strasburg, and like some of the other guys like Paolo Espino last year, who was just thrust into the starting rotation, something that he was not prepared to do. And so they get more injuries that happen this year. Espino goes back into the starting lineup or a similar occurrence would happen. That's pretty much the worst case scenario. So, you know, them being healthy is so crucial to whether or not they can just at least be, you know, the average team that the most optimistic people have them pegged to be.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you brought that up because I actually think this starting rotation could be somewhat pretty decent. If there's a lot of what ifs when it comes to this rotation, you know, it's like, what if Mackenzie Gore is that guy, the former top prospect who was ready to go, lefty, he's filthy. What if Patrick Corbin can somehow bounce back and just be a ghost of what he used to be. That's all we're asking for. What if Steven Strasburg can stay healthy and put together, dare I say, 15 starts this season? There's a lot of what ifs when it comes to this. And then again, Trevor Williams. What if Trevor Williams, Cade Cavalli, Josiah Gray, all these guys that have kind of question marks surrounding them. And I think that's what makes people hesitant about making any sort of projections when it comes to this Nationals team. But I actually think that, call me crazy, but the starting pitching at the end of this year, we could be looking back and being like, that was our strong suit rather than our offense. What do you say?
Yeah, I think for this team to have any chance of just a piece of success this season, it's going to have to start with their rotation, with those 5 guys that'll be lacing them up and hurling that ball towards the hitters every single night. And I think you're right to also focus on Mackenzie Gore. The other guy I would add to that is Cade Cavalli, who you also mentioned, because both of those guys are coming off of injuries last year, and they're both relatively highly touted prospects, especially Mackenzie Gore. And we talked about the last time I was on the show, buddy, about how Mackenzie Gore's first half of 2022 was actually pretty solid. When the injury came, and really it was a slow flare-up of an injury for him. So it was really his last couple of starts coming towards the end of the first half of the season where you started to see his performance suffer. So I think if Mackenzie Gore and Cade Cavalli come back and they're healthy, I think they'll naturally take another step forward. When it comes to injuries to pitchers, though, you worry about, does that velocity dip? Does that fastball come back down to the lower 90s instead of the mid or the high 90s? Those are all things that they're going to have to be cognizant of and have a close eye on when it comes to those specific pitchers. Because guys like Josiah Gray seemed to be a little bit more durable, or at least they just didn't have the same injury issues that guys like Cade Cavalli, Mackenzie Gore were working with. Corbin and Strasburg are probably the biggest candidates for just who knows what, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they could
wild cards of all wild cards.
The wild cards of all wild cards is a perfect way to put it, because we know how good both of those guys can be. They were both incredibly integral pieces of the Nationals World Series run in 2019, but we've found out so little about Steven Strasburg, his recovery, even his rehab has sort of been somewhat of a mystery. And it sounds like we're really not even going to learn even a little bit more about what his situation is like until we actually get to spring training, West Palm Beach, and he's out there, I guess, just kind of moving around a little bit, because he's not going to exactly be throwing bullpen sessions or anything like that anytime soon. At least that's what we think is the case, but who knows how close he actually is. And then like with Patrick Corbin, obviously it's been the last several years that we've watched him struggle, but there have been a couple of, we'll call it, rare instances where he did revert back to his 2019 self. So it's not impossible. There's just going to be a lot that needs to not go terribly at the beginning of this season. I'll hesitate to say that all these things need to go right and the Nationals will be this sort of team. I'm not going to do that because the expectations right now are so low. But if they can just get out of the gate and stay healthy, I think they'll at least be where folks hope that they would be, which is not the worst team in the league.
Yeah, no, and that's totally right too. And I was thinking of this question as you were talking about that, and I didn't even have this on my rundown, but I think this will be an interesting question to pose to you. Out of the 2 guys that we got in that Juan Soto trade who are going to be on the major league roster day one, Mackenzie Gore and CJ Abrams, who do you think makes the biggest impact for the Washington Nationals on the field this season out of those 2 guys?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about it as I'm getting ready to give you my answer. And I think I defaulted to CJ Abrams. And really that's because we saw more of him last year. Obviously, we didn't see Mackenzie Gore ever suit up in a Nats uniform because the injury kept him out for the remainder of the 2022 season. And I think that Abrams offensively is the most important player that they have, certainly one of them. But when I think about what Mackenzie Gore could be for this team, I think if everything goes right for him, his impact will be the most noticeable. And it's because I think if he comes out and he's healthy, he's going to pitch well. And if he pitches well, he's going to be near the top of the rotation in what is a very young rotation at the moment, but it could turn into a young and very good rotation with, some experience. And once they get this year under their belt, who knows? But so that's why I'm going out on more of a limb, I think, to say Mackenzie Gore, because he's coming off a significant injury, but there's just no debating his potential value, not just for this team, but what it was for the Padres too. It's huge. Yeah. There's a reason that he was included in that Juan Soto deal. Right. So yes, Abrams is so crucial, and defensively Abrams is going to be incredibly crucial as well. But I go back to what I just said, and the fact that this has always been a pitching minded team, right? All the success that they've had, especially going back to 2019, has really started with their pitching. So I'll go with Mackenzie Gore for that question. And it is a very good question.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a very well thought out question that I thought about before the show and not on the spot that I wanted to put you on. Yeah. But next, I do want to get into some FanDuel odds that we just got out for the MLB season. And the question is, Danny, are they hating on the Washington Nationals? We're going to get into that. But before, I'm going to tell you guys about my friends over at FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. And guys, I got the Eagles on the money line. I think they destroy the Chiefs, so I think you should tail your boy because I know nothing. FanDuel knows everything, and I'm going to trust them. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL. And now we get back into some of these baseball categories as I have Danny Nokes riding along with me today. And Danny, have you seen the Washington Nationals win total projection right now over at FanDuel?
Not the FanDuel version of it. I believe I had seen a projection somewhere else, and I want to say it was right around like 65 wins.
So right now where we stand, they have us over under 59.5 wins on the season. That is rough. And,
bad.
I bring this up. Yeah, obviously. 59.5. Really, I mean, what are we doing? But, I'm just stumped on it because I actually think we could potentially reach the over. But then again, besides all that, just looking at this on paper, looking at the 59.5 win total, it boggles my mind to think about how this team was once 2019 World Series champions, and now we're sitting here at 59.5 in the over-under win total. That's beside the point from the question that I wanted to ask. Where do you see this win total going?
See, I'm actually, I thought 65 was a pretty good number. And I am a betting man, very much so with FanDuel.
I know.
So if I were gonna take, and I'm not as big into the futures, I will say, because it's just a lot. It's a lot tougher to peg. But if I were gonna lay some cash down on the over under for the total that you just had, the Nationals at 59.5, I would take the over. And I'm not saying that particularly confidently, but the scenarios that we just ran through, right? If things fall toward the more positive side of, the injury phenomenon, which it seems like there's always going to be something that comes up that you're not going to be expecting, right? You just have to hope that it's not an extended period of time. It's not particularly hard for whoever gets hurt to come back from it, that they do come back from it. So if they stay healthy and if they're able to develop some of these guys, I think they'll win 60 to 65 games. I think their ceiling is probably somewhere around 70, maybe a little bit shy of that. And that's if everything were to go right. That would be if, Mackenzie Gore comes back. He's fantastic. Corbin comes back and he's at least average. Josiah Gray continues to get better. And some of the other guys that they have in there are going to have to at least be average. So I would take the over on that total because that's very low, and they're coming off a season where they were the worst team in Major League Baseball, and they could very easily be the worst team in baseball once again. But I'm going to say that the pitching stays healthy. They get better and they win somewhere between 60 and 65 games.
Well, I like that optimism because I actually sort of agree with you. Like, I don't think Mackenzie Gore is going to be banged up all year. I don't think Cade Cavalli is going to be banged up all year. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I just don't see it. Like, I feel like there's a lot of unluckiness to last year. Obviously, we weren't a good team after you trade away Juan Soto and everything that happened with that team. You're going to be bad.
Yeah.
But
I was just going to say you could hit the over and still lose 100 games and you could still cash that bet.
Like I was talking with people and they're like, "Oh, the under." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, like they're like, "You think the Nationals are going to be that good?" I'm like, "Well, it's not that."
You guys know how many games are in a season?
Yeah, I'm like, "You're still going to lose 100 games."
Right.
Like losing 99 games is no different than losing 100. It might sound a little worse when you lose 100, but it's only one game, So it's like I feel like I look at this team and I look at the ceiling that they could potentially have. And I see us around like a 67, 68 win ceiling for this team. And, we're like, I'll take that. Like, it's not that bad. Like compared to 59 and a half, where do you see their ceiling? Like ultimately, if you put a number pin to it, what's that number?
Yeah, I was thinking 70 when I referenced it a couple of minutes ago, but I think yours is probably more accurate. 68 is probably a little bit closer to where if everything were to go right, they'd be at the end of this season. I remember too, this is somewhat related, also somewhat not related, but I want to credit you because it was your Twitter and your statistic that you dug up at some point towards the end of last season. But I believe the Phillies were a 500 baseball team against all of Major League Baseball.
Yep.
Except for the Nationals, who they almost never lost to. And what was their record against the Nats last year? Like 20-5 or something?
Something like that. Like I think it might have been even worse, like 19-2 or something. Like it was really bad. Like very lopsided.
So a lot of what happens with the Nats, I think, will also depend on the strength of the division, which on paper is very good. It's going the NL East, just like last year. We expect it to be a very difficult decision or a very difficult division. And it's funny because, losing someone like Jacob deGrom, who most of us still consider to be the best pitcher in baseball, you'd think that a team like the Mets and their pitching is going to take a step back. But when you're able to add Justin Verlander to that, they're probably not going to take much of a step back at all. Now, Verlander and Scherzer are pretty old. Scherzer is definitely not going to continue to pitch at the same volume of games that he was when he was pitching for the Nationals. We already saw it happen last year with the Mets. He left for the injured list a couple of different times. So if the division isn't that good, or if it's at least a little bit further back from where we're anticipating it, then maybe they could enter the mid 60s in terms of their wins, the Nats. But if the division is all it's cracked up to be, they might not hit that over. We'll see.
I do want to get into the NL East here, but I also thought of another question on the cusp of this. Do you think Steve Cohen is a good owner for baseball? You're bringing up the Mets, the spending that they do, and I have been strong and hard on this. I do not think Steve Cohen is good for baseball. And a lot of people are like, well, spending money is good for baseball. What do you, meaning myself, complain about all the time? Well, Lerner's not spending their money.
Yeah.
And I get that. But when you have Steve Cohen doubling everyone in what he pays, that's just not right. It's just not.
Well, I don't know. The problem is I don't know how you tell him you're not allowed to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really not unlike what the Yankees were doing in the early 2000s, basically being able to buy any player that they wanted. And the difference is the Yankees ended up winning championships, World Series that the Mets have not won, at least not recently. So do I think it's bad for baseball? No, but it definitely, because I just think it sort of just gives it an added layer of intrigue, like, I mean, Mike Trout is making all the money that he could ask for out there with the LA Angels, right? But that franchise is such a sorry excuse.
So bad
for being able to put a consistent winner out there on the field. I mean, it's amazing, actually, the amount of talent that they've had come through that building and have not even like little success. They're not even whiffing the playoffs. No. I mean, they're getting destroyed in the AL West, and the AL West is also not the best division, and that's, the Astros, the Mariners, those are a couple of good franchises. Obviously, we know Houston's just coming off another World Series, but it's not the NL West, right? it's not the NL West. So I see it, and as a fan of the Nationals, I hate it because the Nationals do the exact opposite, right? I'm in the same boat as you. We watch the learners specifically not pay their players what market value would be. And it drives us nuts because then the Nationals are not able to hang on to any of the homegrown talent that they've been cultivating for the last several years.
And it stinks.
Yeah, it does
stinks.
But you would also think that when you have an owner like that within your division, that it might change your own mentality, and that has not been the case with the Nationals and the Learners, has it? I mean,
that's the optimistic side of viewing it, and like I would want to buy in on that, but you and I, we both know it's just not going to happen,
right? And it hasn't changed, and that's the point.
I do want to get into some NL East projections with you real quick, but before that, I'm going to tell you guys about my friends over at Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they are all covered in 100% chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club today, and you can walk in the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. Pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. Coconut puffs is my current favorite. If you're close to Sam's, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie butter, and churro. You can thank me later. And now we get back into the stream with Danny Nokes as we are going to be wrapping up this. But I do have a question again from FanDuel with the division winners that FanDuel has. And right now, if you were to take a stab at it, who do you think sitting atop the NL East as far as betting favorites?
Well, in terms of betting favorites, it's not going to be who I think is actually the favorite. I imagine it's either the Braves or the Mets. It seems when the bookies are putting these projections out there, they default to the teams with the best rotations, and that's definitely understandable.
Yeah.
And the team I think with the best rotation in the NL East is still the New York Mets, despite the fact that they more or less traded DeGrom for Verlander, even though that's not exactly how it shook out. But yeah, I'll say it's probably the Mets.
Well, ding, ding, ding. Plus 135, the Mets are to win the NL East. Yep. Plus 140, you got the Braves, and plus 300, the Phillies. And then plus 4,000, the Marlins. And then plus 25,000 for the Nationals.
You could make some real cash if you take the Nats, man.
5,000 for the Nats. Yeah. That is an astounding number right there. Yeah, but also, like, just looking at this, it's kind of disrespectful to the former NL pennant winning Philadelphia Phillies, who added Trey Turner this offseason.
I know.
That's the first thing I thought of. Was like,
right.
wow, like, I guess not. I guess they don't really like him.
Right. And you know, Nationals fans definitely didn't need that additional reminder, did they?
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I think the Phillies are the favorite this year within the division.
Okay.
I know that they don't necessarily have the horses in the stable when it comes to their pitching rotation that the New York Mets do. But boy, is that lineup something else, man. I don't know. Between Schwarber, Harper, Turner, that sounds like hell to try and get through for a starting pitcher. I mean, I it's hard to get into the whole Trey Turner thing, man, because he of all the guys that are gone, he's probably the one that when it happened, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, the Soto thing we all saw coming, the Scherzer thing we all saw coming. But when Turner was included in that deal for Scherzer to send him to the Dodgers a couple of years ago, man, and that's why it's so difficult. And to watch him continue to succeed the way that he has, you know, and Soto was good when he went out there to San Diego, but I mean, let's be honest, he never reached the peak that he was at here in Washington D.C. He never got he never got to the point where he was playing that well. And Scherzer hasn't gotten back to that point either. So Turner is right now proving to be the key asset that the Nationals lost. And it also has a lot to do with his defense. And all of these things are now in that Phillies clubhouse. And I just it's really difficult for me to see them not win the division with all the talent they've got in that batting order, man. It's crazy.
You know, I've dubbed Trey Turner as the one that got away.
Yeah.
Like, he was the one that we could have extended, the one who was open to an extension, the one with an agent who was very much so open to an extension. So seeing Trey Turner sign with the Phillies is just rubbing salt in the wound, which really just sucks in general. But Danny, you know what does not suck? You, sir. This was a fun episode today.
It was, dude. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me back on. Hopefully we get to do it again soon. And hey, maybe once we start playing some of these games, they'll surprise us, right? I keep saying just temper the expectations, keep an eye on the development, keep an eye on the young guys, and you keep them healthy. Who knows what could happen?
And that's a great point. So thank you, Danny. And also thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. And trust me, he is a prospect encyclopedia covering the stars of tomorrow. So make sure you get that because it is available wherever you get your podcasts. Danny, you have a good day, sir. And also, where can the people find you over on social medias? When is your next show? Because we do know you are a host, 106.7 The Fan. You host pretty frequently there. I think last week it was like 5 days. So tell us your schedule.
Yeah, so I actually don't have any shows lined up right as we're recording this. That'll probably change tomorrow. If I had to guess, I'll probably get a text from our programming director, CK, and we'll probably figure that out. But in terms of social media, on Twitter, at Danny Nokes, that's where I'm always tweeting out our show schedule. So that's a great place to get in touch with me. And then Instagram, at Danny.Nokes. That's also a place where I will put the show schedule up each time I'm on the air. So, I'll keep you posted, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Danny. And thank you guys for tuning in. You enjoy the